Namaste. I thought we'll take a brief reflection today on a subject which is the source of great confusion in understanding ourselves and in understanding the world. And the subject is about morality, idealism, and yoga. Very often we think they are synonymous. So we think a moral man and an ideal man is the highest. And when we look in the world, at the world, we expect God also to be a moralist and an idealist. And when we don't find it so, because if we don't gloss over the appearances, then we devise ways and means, theories, constructions to justify God's actions. How? If you see that a good man is suffering, so how do we justify? We put in the morality angle, pass on the buck to the man. Maybe in his previous life he has done some great sin. So we must understand first of all that the consciousness of the divine is a consciousness of unity. It is not a consciousness of division. Right and wrong, good and bad, vice and virtue, they belong to the human realm. And to put it in this way, morality and idealism are part of the evolution, not the meaning and purpose of evolution. They are part of the evolutionary process. Now let's see how it works. But first let us understand what is morality. Very often people understand morality as certain standards which society has placed before us, whether they are standards set by the society milieu in which we are living, and they are all relative. We know that if in a place like say Western country, if you pick up something from the store, you may be regarded as something, if you've stolen something, obviously it's a highly immoral act. But if you move in a bikini on the seashore, it's not regarded as immoral. In India, if you are even married and you hold the hand of your wife and go, people will say, dekho, dekho, he is not, doing something good. So these are very relative standards. And in each milieu, they have their own meaning. It's not that this is good, that is bad. First of all, we must understand, as the mother says, that when you want to even discover your psychic being, the first steps, she says, you must come out of this idea. Things which are given to you by circumstances of birth. And then she says, look at the relativity of standards. In different ages of mankind, the standards change, they evolve. So, morality by outer, in different religions, like if you go to a typical, now I think things have changed, but in a typical Rajasthani, Marwadi family, I have seen, if you did not do a ghungat in front of, elders, you were being very immoral. You were doing something which is wrong. We have seen this. So, the standards change, they evolve. So, there are two kinds of moral standards. One is which is external to us. This is still an early stage of evolution where we need outwardly somebody like a policeman to set a standard for us, and I have to conform to it. So, the result is that either human consciousness has to have a freedom to expand. It needs different kind of experiences, and it cannot because it's constrained in that sphere. It cannot go beyond the limit. But the advantage is that it keeps in check not only the God but also the Titan. So it keeps us within a small bandwidth of consciousness and activity, which is all right, which is its own limits. And hence it prevents us from becoming totally animal, but also it prevents us from growing into the consciousness of a God. So this is the stage. Then the next step is where morality becomes something inward. You decide what is true. Now, inner standard of morality doesn't act according to social conformity. So what is that standard? There are three standards which, as we human beings evolve, we create for ourselves. One is truth, second is beauty, and the third is good. These are the three things. But again, is truth simply what is seen by appearances? Or truth is something which is inside, what is going on inside us? And Mother in one of her talks says, supramental evolution, she says, my child, with human beings, only what is going, she says, what will supermind remove away from life? So she says there is one thing which supermind will take away, nothing else, because it's an all-inclusive thing. When she was asked that what is it that supermind will reject from life, so she says there's only one thing which supermind will reject. First he says that why should it reject anything, because Sri Aurobindo's yoga is all inclusive. Then he says one thing, and she says hypocrisy. Now you see, when you erect an outer standard, it breeds hypocrisy and falsehood. So she says it will take away hypocrisy and artificiality. See, what is artificiality? Somebody comes to you and you don't really appreciate, but how do you greet? I am so happy to meet you. Now you see, these are all forms of falsehood. They are forms of falsehood. We may not call it, we say it good manners, but it is a form of falsehood. Then she says that in human beings, only that which is going on deep inside you is true. All else is false. She uses the term mental, vital, physical are all codes of falsehood. Now let us look deep inside ourselves. And we will know that what the world sees us, even for a long time, the way we understand ourselves, neither of them is true. The world sees appearance, the world sees action, reaction. Moral people are very much keen to give a very polished appearance outside. But also we don't understand what is going on inside, because we have an instinctive need or tendency to justify. For instance, if somebody has hurt you, what is the reaction? Anger. And we say, it is natural, I'll get angry. You have said this to me, I'm angry. Now both are false. One is a false movement, the reaction is equally a false movement. Why it is called false? Because it's based on the divisive consciousness. The true movement of unity will be that even if the person has, been angry with you because of misunderstanding or whatever way, but you must be able to feel that in the other person also it is the same God who dwells. And to extend yourself inside and make your response based on that truth. What goes on deep inside. So that one discovers when one goes further deep inside, discovers the soul. Then we discover that there is no fixity in life. The problem with mind is it wants to fix everything and for all times. Isn't it? This is the big problem. So you have, let's say with the world of feelings, you feel for somebody at a given point of time. And it is true. But the problem is we believe that this feeling has to be always there. How is it possible? It may be there. Wonderful. If it is rooted in the soul, it will be there. It may even change its format. But if it is not rooted in the soul, it will not be there, it will go away. But we may hold on to it out of habit, out of conformity. So it's no more true. It was true but is no more true. So there are two kinds of truth. Truths which are relative in nature. They are there at a point of time, they will pass away. There are many relative truths like that. And one classic example which Sri Aurobindo says is, when I walk on the road, for me, earth is static, sun rises and sets, isn't it? It is true. It is a practical truth needed for our everyday life. We can't live with this constant idea that earth is moving very fast and I am, doing Sirsasana all the time. We'll collapse if we think like that. But when we rise up in the consciousness, we discover it's not the sun which is moving from east to west. Earth is moving. Another truth. See the relativity of truth. You go still further, you discover both sun and earth are moving. But at different ways, drifting at, there is an actual movement of the sun, sign-like movement, compared to the whole galaxy. Then you discover where is truth. Then you, ultimately, if you go to that level, you discover what Isha Upanishad's very first phrase, half a phrase, quarter phrase. Isha Vashyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. All is moving except the Lord, the one unmoving stable basis. Now when you discover the Lord, then you see that everything is belonging to a world of relativities. We want to fix things and it becomes a dogma. How is a religious teaching formed? Sometime back somebody was telling me about someone who is a great Krishna Bhakta and said that he does a lot of fasting. So fasting in Krishna Bhakti is not. Now Krishna danced in Vrindavan. Now if I start dancing, I have fixed it. And I have lost Krishna, but I have kept the dance. So religions, all religions, There are people in desert of Arabia. Somebody had some glimpse of whatever kind, fell on his knees and says, Ya Allah. Now you say this is the one thing which is important. Not the tapasya inside, behind it, not the state inside it, not that aha moment ke pehle what all happened. And you start believing that by doing this you have, contacted. Even prayers have become mechanical. A prayer, at one point the mother says, a teaching or a set of words repeated too often become false. Even if it is the same teaching from a great teacher. Because they are not being lived. So you see the same thing which is true at one point becomes false at another. That's why people sometimes find it very difficult. No, I belong to this religion, all my life I'll follow it. That means you are not progressing, frankly speaking. And even if I want to follow the same religion, let me go deeper and deeper to its deeper truth. Then I am truly progressing. There are only two ways of progressing. A religion hits its limit, go further into something which will give you a greater truth. Or within that religion, go deeper and deeper. Go past the outer forms, formulas in which it has been presented to you and touch the bedrock. These are the two ways. And if after touching you have still greater aspiration, like at least in my case, this was the thing. You have now Sri Aurobindo has opened another door for something very new and unprecedented. So there is a world of relative truths and a world of true truth. So initially we hold on to the world of relative truths and then we want to discover the true truth behind all appearances. So let's put it like this. Again, we take the same example of the world of feelings. Mother gives this example. If you observe, they come, they rise and fall. Now, a lady or a man in young age feels love for whatever, a man or a woman, and then they get married. Then where does the love get transferred? To a child. And when the child grows up and has a grandchild, has his own child, the love is further transferred onto the grandchild. Or if you are very fortunate, you have learned the lesson fast, then it gets transferred to the divine. Now, what is the common element in all these relative truths? It's the power of love which is evolving. That is common. When there was the love for a man or a woman, it was love. When you have love for a child, it is love. When you have love for the divine, it is love. So you discover that there is a stable truth behind all these changing appearances. Hold on to that and keep on refining and purifying it. This is the way of yoga. That's why people can't understand. Somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, why do men like Buddha, they get married and then they leave and come away? Now Sri Aurobindo never stopped loving, but his love changed its orientation. Then he says, of course, Sri Aurobindo replied with this sense of humor. He said that, when they get married, they are in ignorance. Then when knowledge comes, they go towards that. But the fact is, he never stopped loving. It's just that his love changed from that kind of love, where he was materially taking care, to a love where, by the very fact that he was united by the divine, the fact is that her many lives were taken care of. So, same with Buddha. So, we have to go to that route. Morality prevents us because it builds certain. Same with beautiful. Morality means, intrinsic morality means your actions must conform to the law of beauty. Take an example. So people take it that, the wife should cook food or the child should obey me. And if the child doesn't obey, you have a right to shout. And if the wife doesn't cook, you have the right to tell her that, look, you are not a good lady. Now, is it beautiful? By no standard is beautiful. If we look inside, we'll understand it's not beautiful. To raise your hand against a child or anybody is not beautiful unless you are doing it out of self-defense. When mother was told that children don't listen and, we have to be firm, we have to, give them a little. Mother said, what if a gigantic being comes and takes you and shakes you? How would you like it? Today you are doing it to a child. Tomorrow if a gigantic being, gods can do it to you. Then you say God is so unkind. But if we are in that crude state, then that will be the dealings of the master. Because the crude ore needs that kind of pulverization. So God is not being immoral when he shakes us up. He is simply telling us your ore is very crude. I need to do this to you. That's how Sri Aurobindo has put it. That's the way. So beautiful changes its meaning. And good. What is good? So we think what is good is what is pleasant. If you provide things which make a child happy, I'm being good. If a man keeps on buying ornaments for his wife, things have changed now, but I'm old-fashioned time, when that was a sign. Or sari kharida, ye kharida. He really takes good care of me. He is not bothered that what is happening as a result. She is sinking into a complete material consciousness and the aspiration chance. Rather, he should have told her that, come, let us read. Savitri, come, let us sit for meditation. Of course, if she is not interested, it's a different matter. Or vice versa. So, you see that good, we thought providing material things is good. But at another stage, we discover, no, this is a big hurdle. So now again you see how divine acts in the world. He doesn't all the time give us what we want. He often takes away what we want. So we have to create a moral theory of karma. But God will say, please excuse me, I am doing everything. Why is He doing it? Because He knows that now you have gone past the stage when this would make you happy. I want to make you taste the joy of turning inwards and coming in contact with my presence. So good also changes. So there is a good which is relative. You can't do this to a child. To a child you provide things. But if a child is indulging into those things, then you have to bring the other dimension. So again, truth, beauty and good, which are the three standards which men must follow, human beings, they must understand there is a relativity there which in ignorance, and there is a true sense of what is true sense of what is beautiful, true sense of what is good. So what really is truth? One word, and we'll read this prayer of Mother today. Whatever is in conformity with the divine will, nothing else. See, Kurukshetra. Wasn't it true that it was Arjuna's relatives? Wasn't it a good thing to do if he just left them wherever they are? Wasn't it beautiful to say that, look, I am renouncing and going? But the divine will was otherwise. To obey the divine impulsion, it's very difficult because it can contradict every little notion or idea that we carry in our head. It is very wrong morally for Buddha to have, walked out of the leaving his wife and son. But for that, Buddha may have been a good king, a good husband, but not the giver of solace and compassion to a whole mankind. So when we obey the divine impulsion, that alone leads us to truth, beauty and good. So moral evolution, same thing with idealism. Idealism again erects a standard. No, I must be honest under every circumstance. Very good. But the next proposition is not good. If I am honest, I must be always promoted. If I am honest, I must be always even if I am wrestling with a sumo wrestler, I must win. Why? I am an honest man. I am a taxpayer. No, that's not how creation operates. How does creation operate? Creation operates in a very simple way. This is again a divisive thought. When a tiger and a deer actually confront each other, and deer has no chance of escape, 99.99% the tiger is going to just one stroke and finish. Why? Is deer a bad guy? Or is tiger a super good guy? He is being rewarded? No. The strength in the tiger and the strength in the deer are coming together. If you are dealing in this world, you must understand how this world operates. If you don't understand, you say, no, I am an honest man. It won't work because you are in the world, you must understand the way. I'm not saying become like the world, but you must understand what is the law that operates in this world. For example, if I am living in the world and I want to just be, I've seen it can happen, that I want to be on the top and I am rising. Now, I have forgotten that there is a law of the world. What is the law of the world? They will be recoiled from everyone around. That's how the world operates. So, if you don't understand, I'm not saying so next moment you try to, flatter everybody. No, I'm not saying that. But all that we must understand that idealism is again a reflection in the mind of something which is distorted. For example, it is a very short-term thing. It doesn't understand the world play. So, Subhash Chandra Bose, Sri Aurobindo used the word sentimental idealist. What was about him? Very simple logic. Britishers have occupied in India, they must go. Doesn't matter how you do it. So he contacted the Japanese, shook hands with them, and he contacted Hitler and shook hands with him. Imagine if they invaded India. On one side, the Mongol lineage, Japanese, can be merciless with all the beauty and everything, love for beauty, they can be extremely merciless. And on the other side, Hitler. Can you imagine? What was the better predicament or worse predicament? We all know now. But an idealist doesn't understand. Idealist again creates a rigid standard for all times. Again, in evolution, it's necessary. When we are in ignorance, we can say, I will live to be forever honest, non-violent, even if I am slain. It's okay. At a stage of evolution, it's perfectly fine. But if we think that this is the purpose of evolution to create a moral and ideal man, then we are mistaken. Morality and idealism is a passage, not the end of our long evolutionary journey. The end is not moral man, social man, religious man, ethical man, idealistic man, but a divine man. And divine doesn't act according to any of these standards. He acts according to a light which we do not possess. So the first business of man should be to find that light. This is the saying of the sages. Find that light, find that will. What is his will? Whenever a situation happens, we are busy. What kind of, either judging at it from very personal standards, now that is the worst. Better is moral and idealism. Mera kya fayda? My advantage. This is the worst kind of standard. Or we are looking at it from moral and idealistic standpoint. Generally, we use a double standard. As far as we are concerned, we see how is it benefiting or losing us. As far as the other person is concerned, moral and ideal. Isn't it? So, we don't understand God's play. At the end, we create some such theory. But what we should look for is only for one thing. In this whole drama which is unfolding, what is the divine intention within me? Not in the other person. Leave that person. Somebody has hurt you, somebody has stolen your money, somebody has been dishonest. It's okay. That is other person's business. What is the divine intention in me? That's the only thing which matters. So, animal man lives by might is right. Then to teach his might, that might too must be tempered, comes Parshuram, Rama of the axe. But to teach that even strength must be brought under control of calm reason comes Rama, the illumined mind, ethical standards of the highest order. And to teach that ultimate dharma or the confusion of dharma cannot be resolved by the ethical illumined mind, but by living by greater truth comes Krishna. So it's an evolutionary process. So if we are an animal man, living only for desires, impulses, instinct, better to be a moral and idealistic man. First step, follow a social standard. If we have followed it but feel it is stifling my own growth, a child must look after his parents in old age, but the child wants to expand his wings, go further. Then follow the inner law of ethics. Beyond morality, idealistic nature. But even in idealism, you are not getting the full answers to your quest. Go beyond the moral and ideal man to the spiritual man. Spiritual man also, you are not finding the perfect answer to the earth's hopes. You have discovered a light within. We don't know what this light has got to do with the world which is in darkness. Then come to Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Namaste.